I'm just gonna have to hold my phone this way. I hope everybody that listens is keeping well. I've been meaning to do this audio since yesterday. It's about culture. Culture is a process of gradual assimilation, mostly unconscious assimilation, yeah? People just gravitate towards each other eventually because likeness seeks likeness, yes? Regardless how you look in the outside. What really matters is what's in the inside, and people will resonate with that. Eventually, there's going to be an unconscious assimilation of ideas between people about ideas, knowledge, beliefs, yeah? So the process is going to be a lot easier if people share the same values, they share the same ideas, they share the same way of knowing things, they share the same logic, yeah? So out of this, art, just blossoms. If the soil is fertile amongst, this group of people, art, language, everything just blossoms. It's, very spontaneous and, easy thing if there's, fertility, if there's a fertile soil, things just blossom. Um, People in the past, before borders and passports, people were a lot more tribalistic in the sense that, like I said, likeness seeks likeness, and eventually, if you were born in a tribe that you didn't feel, like it was your place, you just packed your stuff and left and tried your luck elsewhere. You know, people would do that. People have been sailing the world, for instance, for a long time. I don't buy the official narrative about sailing the world and etc. That it was discovered by this, that, and the other. No, I believe I mostly think. I don't believe. I think we've been sailing the world. Reading the stars and sailing the world, following the currents for a long time. I remember watching this documentary. There's this people, this tribe in India, and they were very skilled at building boats. They built these huge, gigantic boats made out of wood, and they were so good at it. And they would sail the world in these boats. When the English arrived, eventually they dismantled everything. Yes, but you know, sailing the world is nothing new. Yeah. So people just traveled by foot, on horse, by boat. They just travel the world and find their place. Because, likeness seeks likeness. We all seek, to belong. Now, around the world, there's diverse cultures. And how can you understand someone else's culture? How can you make the first steps? Well, first respect. I mean, it's the ultimate thing. Respect. You have to respect and be very attentive. So I'm going to read a passage here from this book. To understand and appreciate someone else's culture, one must become first united with it in spirit. You see, it's a spiritual thing, yeah? One must learn to feel and to understand their cosmology as they have felt and understood it. Yeah. Never approaching them with condescension or contempt, or even with the sort of quote unquote objectivity that, while it may succeed in depicting, always fails to interpret their works and days. So what he's trying to say is, if you approach things, objectifying them, only objectifying them, you're not gonna, capture their essence. That's a problem of many, many, especially cultures that are more materialistic. They only focus on the material aspect, on the superficiality of things, on business, on power, on money. They don't care about spiritual stuff at all. They don't care about that. They just care about the objectivity of things. So they eventually end up, having trouble with that culture. They just don't understand each other, and that causes many conflicts. It's very sad. They are just there for the objects. They are just there for the oil, the gems. I don't know what could it be. They are there for the that stuff. They couldn't care less about anything else. So they will never understand someone else's culture. They will never understand where they come from. If you look at through objectivity, they will only succeed in depicting the culture. They will never understand it or explain it. They just give this superficial depiction, this superficial description. They will never be able to explain it or understand it. It's similar to our modern scientists, which are, for the most part, mathematicians. Their equations are good at depicting. Explaining, no. They depict, you know, in their imagination, they are coming, with all of these movements and all of these trajectories and all of these speeds, right? And they calculate them. They are depicting, this hypothesis. If this goes in that direction and that has this mass and the other does this and that and the other, my calculations will predict that this, that, and the other will happen. But that doesn't mean it's the truth. That doesn't mean it's reality, you know? Doesn't mean it's reality. In fact, mathematics, counting, the measurements we use, kilogram, watt, liter, whatever, all those measurements, time, hours, minutes, seconds, those are measurements that we came up with. We use them conventionally to calculate, to count, but they don't exist in nature at all. We came up with those things to describe, not to explain, but to describe, to depict. So, so anyway, this obsession over numbers and etc. is part of a more, elitist. Elites, they are more concerned with power, money, grabbing stuff. They don't care about spiritual sides of things. They don't care about the explanations, the essence of things. They don't care about that. They just want the money. They just want this, that, and they just want power, and they couldn't care about anything else. So culture also produce, writing, right? Reading and writing. Um, it's not a thing you can say, oh, look, in that date over there, people learn how to read and write. No, that's stupid to me. Reading and writing, I mean, it comes to people naturally. We've been using it for a long time, but people just didn't felt like putting it into a book, their cosmology. They just didn't felt like doing it. So, in fact, most of the, uh, philosophers of the past, they didn't write down their stuff. It was often their students who wrote it down. They passed them mouth to mouth. And passing it mouth to mouth is a good lie detector, It's a good lying detector. You can use your intuition. You can filter things, Writing it down, it becomes more foggy. Becomes more foggy. So traditions are oral and they are sacred. Cosmology is sacred, spiritual. It's spiritual, and it's passed from mouth to mouth. If you put it in a piece of paper or, I don't know, somewhere else, you are, lowering it down. You are exposing it to, being sabotaged. You are exposing it to being misunderstood, which eventually happens. By the way, we don't need to write down rules and regulations. We pretty much know, unaliving people is wrong. We pretty much know that lying is wrong, that stealing is wrong, right? Sometimes we let go, small lies for our own, survival. For instance, you're not going to say to your girlfriend that dress makes her look fat. You're going to lie, small lie. It's going to spare you, a lot of headaches. Yeah, and you just say, oh no, it looks good on you. It's a small lie, yeah, but ultimately there are some lies, that are just unforgivable. The more, you lie, the more you will distort reality. Distortion of reality is also, known as psychosis, and psychosis is very contagious. So, once upon a time, they decided to force, quote unquote, everybody to read and write. Well, first they come up with the printing press. They bring the printing press to Europe, and they started mass printing this one book, which was the King James Bible. And then they were like, okay, how are we going to make people read it? We're going to have to teach them how to read and write. It was a political book. The empire said, let us print this book so that we will end, paganism pretty much. We'll end the differences that exist in the empire. Everybody will be, the same. That's an idea of a totalitarian regimes. They just don't tolerate, you know, they just don't tolerate, diversity. They want everybody to be the same, sameness. You know, Totalitarian regimes only produce sameness. A photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, they produce sameness and mediocrity eventually. Because every photocopy, it gets the words, the ink. At some point, you can't read anything anymore. It just becomes, very, very diluted. Um So our education system, around the 1800s was forced on people, mainly because of the Industrial Revolution. It wasn't out of the goodness of the hearts of the elites. They needed people to read the instructions and count and measure, and operate the machines. So, and read the instructions of the products they were going to buy. So they kind of forced the education, quote unquote, on people. And it is such a destructive, nihilistic, atheistic system that it really, destroys spirituality out of people. You know, I'm going to read a passage here. uh, it was Sir George Birdwood who wrote in 1880. He said, our education system has destroyed their love for their own literature. He's talking about, other peoples from other places. They forced to do the same education on them. And he said, our education has destroyed their love for their own literature. They destroy their delight in their own art. And worst of all, their repose on their own traditional and national religion. It has disgusted them with their own homes, their parents, their sisters, and their very wives. It has brought discontent into every family so far as its baneful influences have reached. Yes, they just want obedient automatons and consumers. It's a very nihilistic, atheistic, parasitical, you know, system, the education that they give in schools. And it has no spirituality whatsoever, and it kind of destroys cultures. It destroys culture. and so I'm going to continue. So our elites, they're obsessed with materialism. They're obsessed with money and power, and they think everybody else in the world is the same. They think their culture, is universal, and they think everybody else is the same. They don't, or they suffer from the main character syndrome. They just can't imagine that there's other peoples out there that are different. They think that everybody's the same. They are the main character, and everybody's like them. No. So I'm going to quote, or should I say, read. I'm going to read a little bit some words of Plato. He said, the elites, they think that nothing is except what they can grasp firmly with their hands. Again, they are empty of any spirituality, and the only thing that exists is what they can grasp firmly with their hands. So, love, honor, humility, respect, all those things don't exist because you can't grasp them. You can't grasp them with your hands, can you? Anyway, so I think culture, you know, different cultures should be cherished and protected, and everybody should mind their own business. Yeah, I would say keep it close to your heart. Your culture. Keep it close. Keep it in your private property. If you live in a multicultural society, keep your culture close to your private property. If you have people that follow the same culture, you can join, and do it. I don't know, in somewhere else, right, in public, etc. But when you are outside, don't try to spread it like an evangelist. Like that's just crazy. Again, people who are evangelical about their religions, again, they are being very, very disrespectful of everybody else, and they simply can't understand or have compassion or empathy that others might be different from them. It's like they never think, it never crossed their mind that they might be the bad guys. They suffer from the main character syndrome. They think they are always the good guys. It's like that sketch I caught a sketch here on YouTube. There was these two soldiers. They were watching the enemy. Look at those bastards! Blah 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 blah. We're gonna show them. And one turns to the other and say, "Hey, I've been thinking lately. Is it possible that we are the baddies?" You know, he was questioning. He was having this moment that, yeah, maybe we're in the wrong side of of this. So anyway, I think I'm gonna shut up now. I've been talking for almost 17 minutes. All right, tell me what you guys think. Have a nice day.